Hello, everyone. My name is Arjan Scherpenisse. Nobody except Dutch people can pronounce that correctly, so that's okay, I guess. Let's start with a little bit of recursion. My name is Arjan Scherpenisse, and my background originally was in artificial intelligence. So I started studying that straight out of school. But when I was done, I didn't really want to go into, and it was, by the way, it was way before this big AI hype with all the GPUs and stuff like that. So this early 2000s. So I didn't want to get a normal job immediately afterwards. Well, I was working as part-time as a freelancer as a PHP developer. So I did art school in the evenings. And then after art school, I basically started doing some freelancing. And at that point in time, around 2009, I think, a former coworker of mine introduced me to Erlang because Mark Worrell, he found it quite frustrating. He was a PHP developer as well. He found it quite frustrating that PHP limits you so much in what you can do, and CPUs can do so much more. So he introduced me to Erlang, and that triggered for me immediately because I really liked Prolog, and Prolog is actually an AI programming language, like a logic language, with the syntax of Erlang is inspired by it. So the syntax actually was something that got me into Erlang, which is kind of a funny story, I guess. Since then I've been freelancing, doing some web development stuff with the Zotonic framework. So when Elixir first came along, I was really like, I don't really need Elixir. I mean, Erlang is basically Elixir with, another skin, or the other way around. But then what I did see that the community around Elixir was so much more, there was so much more momentum behind it. Like they were organizing meetups, they were doing stuff that, there was also the tooling that was getting a lot better than the Erlang tooling. So at one point I started doing more Elixir things. And now since a year I've been doing it really full time with my own startup, which is that I run, it's basically a chatbot platform, Botsquad it's called. You can look it up online. This talk is not about that. So what I'm going to show to you today is basically three things. So, besides Botsquad, I run an Elixir Bootcamp. So I'm going to show you like why we are doing that, what exactly we are teaching, and then some reflections at the end, like how we experience it and how the participants experience it. But before we do that, I'm from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands there's, I mean, the startup community is not as big as here in London, but it's quite, there's still quite a lot of companies that are using Beam technologies, and we're trying to make a list of those. And the list is expanding every day, and there are actually some quite big names. Today I found out, I should have known that before, that Booking.com is actually using React quite a lot for all of their Erlang stuff, and it's a Dutch company. Tele2 is using it for some internal tools. So I think there are that we know of, like about 50 or so companies actively using Erlang and Elixir in some kind of capacity. And I think about half of these are really using it as their core, like in production kind of situation, and the other half is like either they use it as an internal tool for their own side projects, or they use it as one of their preferred technologies in the case of agencies. Well, that's one side of the Beam landscape in the Netherlands, and there's quite an active community. There's a lot of Elixir meetups in too crowded spaces, almost every 2 months or so. We get together at one of these companies that host it. And there's actually also meetups for other functional programming languages as well, but they're not so, I think they're less attended. Like for instance, there is no Erlang meetup. I don't know, Elixir is, I guess it's a more newer generation of people who are more used to going to meetups, etc. So having that said, why do we want to do a bootcamp? Well, at these Elixir meetups, often one of the presenters asks the questions like to the audience, like, hey, how many of you raise your hands if you use it in production? Everybody gets that question sometimes, and we didn't see so many hands go up. well, it's getting better, but still we thought, hey, I mean, there's a lot of people like coming to the meetups who are really interested in it, but people are like, yeah, my boss, you know, and well, they really want to use it, but there's lots of different reasons why they can't. So we really wanted to change that. And besides that, I also really like to teach programming, like to students and giving workshops. And the other teacher who's not here, Tonsi, this is the guy. He's not here because he just had his third child, I must say. So he also really likes to teach. So we together decided, hey, let's just do this. He does it from his own, so we are basically just two companies, and we reserve some time to give these bootcamps. And actually, we started with that 2 years ago. So the format is, when people hear bootcamp, they maybe think it's a 3-month course and people start from scratch and they become out as pros, but it's not like that. It's, well, we could do something like that, but then we should really start, you know, a school. So for us, it's more of a side thing, but we are, so it's a 2-day course from 9 to 5 with 2 teachers and about 20 participants each time. So it's quite, that's also about the limit because it needs to be manageable. We really want to keep it interactive and to keep it hands-on, people programming and having conversations, etc., interactive. And we also usually get requests from companies who you know want to bring a group of people there, employees, and we teach them. So we do some sponsorship arrangements. Yeah, and so I must say both Tonsi and me attend. This format was inspired by the Erlang camp. It was a series of boot camps, I think 4 or 5 years ago by some American guys who did that as well. So this format is a bit inspired on that. And then you must ask yourself, who are we going to give these boot camps to? So we're not going to teach every aspect of programming. So we require people to have some kind of knowledge and who are interested in the language. And we just wanted to give them that final push to, you know, start using it and give them a reason. Actually, there's some guys here in the audience from from the boot camp. So that's very nice. And also, we also try. These are quotes from the website, by the way. So we also try to get people like who already do FP programming and then getting them more into OTP. In practice, that did not really happen that much. Most people who participated were, mostly coming from scripting languages or Java, etc. So this is how they look like, almost all men, but luckily there were a few women, and participants even came from Germany and from France, and even one from London. So that was it was quite amazing that people just you know, find the time and to do this for 2 days. Yeah, so what do we actually teach? And that's of course where it gets interesting. Well, we start. How many of you here have seen Erlang the movie? It's not even half, I guess. So go look that up. Erlang the movie is quite an amazing promotional video made by Ericsson, I think in the 80s or like beginning of 90s, explaining the Erlang system to you know, I guess to upper management about you know, this is a box and it can do phone calls and you can hot reload your code and you know, the conversation can keep going. It's really a classic. Although it's of course a bit old-fashioned, but it makes it funny anyway. And these are actually the 3. No, Robert is not in here. These are 2 of the founders, Joe and Mike. And well, people just love it. Although the movie is a bit long and goes a bit into detail about, you know, phone systems because that's what Erlang was used for. What the main takeaway of this video is, I think, is the fault tolerance part. Like they really want to make rock solid systems, and the fact that it can be highly concurrent and everything and performant, that's just basically just a side effect of it being designed in a way that it can be very stable. So that's my main takeaway from that. To get them in the mood. So at this point, we just try to get them through the the most basic features, like how to install it on your computer, etc. And that's all peanuts for them. Yeah, so we introduced them, functions, modules, data types. They get almost all the data types. Maybe the only one that is new coming from a scripting language is the tuple kind of construct, but that comes back later when we, of course, talk about more about pattern matching. So right after that, the first morning is spent teaching them about functional programming, a bit what Kate was referring to. So pattern matching is something that really, well, that's where actually it doesn't get tricky right away, but I think these are very new subjects for people. Especially if you can do it, you can not only do it with the pattern matching operator, but you can also do it anywhere, basically. So the equals operator, you can implement an equals function like this, and then people go, oh, wait, that's pretty insane. Though it is, of course, a bit of a contrived example. So the first assignment that we give them is to make a kind of FizzBuzz implementation, which is like a sequence of numbers, and it's a memory game, and for every time a number is divisible by 3, you say fizz, and if it's divisible by 5, you say buzz, and if you divide by both of them, you say FizzBuzz. So we give them this. These are doc tests, so they can just run mixed tests and then see if their function works. So yeah, they come up with all kinds of different implementations. And that's also something that I must say, that most of the assignments that we give are, especially the first day, are test-based. So we provide them the tests. We could also, of course, have them write the tests themselves, but in this case, we just provide them the tests, and then they struggle until it turns green, basically, to fix the assignment. And that is actually yeah, something that I think that's, for them, it's actually, I think, a good experience to do it like that. And recursion is like the second big FP topic that is quite challenging for them. And here you see quite some difference. Some people from a more computer science background immediately get it. So with the Fibonacci sequence, this is like a mathematical definition, but this is already almost Erlang. If you would put some semicolons, etc. here, and it's almost, well, if you rewrite it a bit, it would be Elixir as well. But some people really have an issue already here with like, what is this? Why would I need it? Why would I need to do it? And on the other side of the spectrum, some participants are really eager, and they start asking questions about tail call optimization already, things that we even didn't consider introducing at this point. But so there can be quite a bit of difference in understanding. So then after lunch we actually start introducing them to the actual interesting things, and that's of course the concurrency aspect of the beam and Elixir. So we take the approach here that we start from the bare primitive. So as the book from Joe Armstrong about Erlang also tells us, like, just view the VM as a world, and every single one of you is a process. Everybody has its own state. The only thing you can do is you can talk to somebody, to update his or her state. So that's how we introduce the send, the spawn, and the receive primitives, and that's basically, we don't go into like OTP and supervision, all those like higher level constructs yet. Just start with the basics, just to really, because this is really something where OO is not gonna help you. This is really different. So those basics, and for the tests we give them some kind of first simple process that they need to make, which is just a key value store. Basically, just managing a map in a process and putting values and getting values out of it. You don't see actually send and receive here, because we already tell them that you can actually move that logic of sending and receiving behind the function to make it more abstract, or more the implementation details hidden from the actual interface. And so in the slides we actually already give them this this implementation more or less, and then you see that some people are just discovering by themselves, and others are just copy-pasting it, then learning it in that way. And the other two assignments are, add some new commands to it. So one command is to delete something from the store and wipe the store altogether. And especially this wipe command, you would like add an extra function clause here with the wipe statement. That would be, people are like, how do I do that? I need to iterate over that map and then delete everything from the map. And then when you give the answer, like, no, just call the loop function with an empty map, then they really go like, oh, wait, yeah, that's something in, if you would write it in OO, it would probably not really occur to you. Because they did already, like, we introduced into them these receive clauses and then handling these different commands, we actually already almost wrote the gen server. Because the only thing a gen server gives you is that you write the handling of these commands, and the looping, etc., is done for you. So in the next assignment, we actually tell them about gen server. This is the end of day one almost, and then in the gen server they basically add the same assignment, but then just implement the callback. So we introduce them to behaviors and callback notation. And then when their brains are almost frozen at the end of day one, we introduce them to an actual gen server, because it's like only having like a key value store is a bit boring. We wrote a whole bunch of unit tests that model an elevator. So on the left side you see like the elevator ticking and then some state being checked of the elevator. And then on the right side, you see the tests that fail. So we do this in a live coding way. So basically I just, everybody shouts like, oh no, you need to do this. And then I add some lines to the gen server, we run the tests again. And that's like, you see the participants, it's almost like they're watching like a movie. Like they're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And everybody, it really gets like this group thought process going. So then on the next day, we continue and we cover the basics of real OTP. So we again start with like how do you like actually manage another process, links, monitors, and then how does a supervisor work? And also ETS is a topic that we cover. And from this day on, we let the participants a bit more in the open. So we just give them pointers, say, hey, you can do this or you can do that. So the assignments include things like, just put it in an OTP app, and then give it an actual HTTP interface, and add some logs, create an ETS table to fill it. So actually one participant just, wrote a whole UI for it. So using some JavaScript and CSS, so he figured out how to do EEX templating and how to serve static files. We don't cover Phoenix, by the way. We only use plug, so very basic setup, because Phoenix is like you can spend 2 days or even more on that by itself. So he figured that out. It was pretty nice. So in the afternoon of the second day, I got a pull request. Oh, I fixed the assignment and I made this example implementation. So you can see in real time the elevator going up and down. And then in the second afternoon, the afternoon of the second day, we have them toy around with deployment. We tell them, how we at our companies do it and how releases work, and also distribution, like how to add more nodes and have them communicate. So one of the assignments is to have the elevator gen server runs on one node and the web server runs on the other node, and then make that work. And then lastly, we introduce them to trace. Actually, we already showed the observer earlier, but still having something like the observer in a language is really fantastic. And that's also what the responses of the participants are. You can gather so much by just looking at this. For instance, We tell them about the message queue, and if you see the message queue boiling up, then probably your gen server is stuck, etc. So this is one of the tools, and then we cover, well, we mention and cover recon and tab and some other tracing and debugging libraries. That being said, about the course, it's a pretty intense course. People are quite, they get a lot of knowledge, and we think that, we try to do a good job, but so it really depends. Some people get everything, and other people, they just stay with, for instance, with the first day. So we, at the end of the course, we do a little exit poll. We give them an assignment, and most people think that the level of the course is just right. Some people think it's too easy. That's not everybody filled in this, by the way. This is only 11 of the 20. And they really like us. That's always nice to know. We were, well, not always like we didn't stimulate enough interest, somebody said. Was it you? No, I don't think so. So we also asked about the course content. And yeah, we think like we try to split it up a bit. So on the first day more structured, and on the second day more, I think more open interactive sessions. So I guess they liked it. They liked the mix of those, the theory, the hands-on experience. Like functional programming is like for everybody, like a big eye-opener. But the bootcamp was also considered more of a tool set. Like, you know, we give a lot of information in 2 days, and then they just go home and they probably read it over, and they need to really digest what just happened. So for us, lessons learned is, well, we should keep it interactive, but sometimes we really get like diverted with some people really asking specific questions about specific subjects. We got some feedback that was maybe sometimes a bit too in-depth. And also for me, because I'm a bit of an old school guy, I use Erlang, still use Erlang. I use the Erlang syntax sometimes, or you know, Erlang functions where I should have used like the normal or a more recent Elixir function. So that also got some people confused. Also, for instance, with the observer itself, which shows terms in Erlang form. Yeah, the assignments that could be done more. We could have done it more as a peer-to-peer learning situation where we would show the solutions of everybody. We did not really, well, there was just too much material to really go into how did you solve this, how did you solve this, etc. And I think we could have been even more effective in learning, and if people like learned more from each other as well. I mean, we saw that happening. We saw like groups forming, etc. But not everybody participated in that. Yeah, and about the audience, like right now we saw a really big difference between like, you know, people who were already quite capable and people who were just starting with, you know, with programming in general. So we should find some way to be more specific about, you know, how can we deal with this difference in skill. But I guess it's always a problem in teaching. So at the end we asked the question: would you be interested in a second, like a more advanced bootcamp? And people said yes, of course. So almost everybody wanted to, you know, to learn more. So I think that's a good indication of that. They really got triggered by this 2-day course. So we are really considering it. I mean, we do this on the side, but we're definitely going to continue on this. Yeah. So thank you. That's my talk. I have one more thing to add, a shameless plug. I am organizing, together with Erlang Solutions, the Codebeam Lite Amsterdam. So if any of you want to come over to Amsterdam, it's going to be amazing. We have already Mikhail Muscala and Sasha Juric confirmed as speakers. And ticket sales are open, and if you want to submit a talk, please do. The call for papers is also open.
Definitely do that. Definitely do that. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good reminder. Thanks. And any questions? I always have one. Oh no, here.
There's one.
Sorry, I'm just walking in front of you.
So I'll try to shout.
I don't know if
I
they
can
get
hear you.
recorded.
So people get really frustrated when they're learning things. Often, I'm curious what you saw experienced developers getting frustrated at in your course.
What did I get experienced developers frustrated at in my course?
Like Elixir content specifically, or Elixir learnings.
And maybe some people complain about like that come from other like functional languages like F#. We had a guy and he was really missing the type system. That was one thing. So he was really focusing on like, you know, why don't you use dialyzer more? Stuff like, yeah, so that's one thing that comes up.
Like, why isn't this my favorite language? Like, I feel like people do all the time. Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have a question, actually. No, I'm always curious to understand. I always ask that to people who teach. When you start interacting with processes, if you have the opportunity to explain that to a person that has very little software development or programming experience, if, like, are they that tricky, or is it something that people get to understand, like if they don't have baggage, basically?
If they don't
how does that work?
Well, I think it actually is a quite natural way. I don't think it's. I mean, we don't have that many inexperienced programmers, but I think in general, if you think about it, like what I said about Joe Armstrong and his comparison with the real world. And yesterday I talked to somebody and compared it to Scratch, which is like this graphical programming language, which is basically also an actor model, because every sprite that you put on screen has its own loop, and you can actually send messages to each other. And people, like kids, learn that at the age of 6. So I think it can be it's a very natural way of thinking. Even, I don't know if it's more natural than OO, but I think it can. I don't think that's really hard. I think it's just like the paradigm shift. If you come from a scripting language and you hear process, and you think like, oh no, Unix process, those are expensive, and I think like it's more in your own. I don't think it's natural to think that would be already a hurdle.
I tend to agree, but I ask because I'm always afraid that it's just like a personal perspective.
I mean,
data is useful in that respect.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, thank you for your talk. So how did you deliver these? Because were you sort of interacting in the shell for some examples, and then switching to an editor using when you were actually sort of teaching as opposed to giving them exercises?
Yeah. So I had like presentations, and I had some like code examples just in the presentations. But a lot of the times I just to show something, I just switch to a shell, or for this elevator thing, I just had my Emacs on the left and a test runner on the right that automatically refreshed. So while I was typing, the test would turn red from green or something like that. So so I try to keep it interactive. Yeah.
More?
Here's one.
Oh. I'll go from the front.
Thanks so much for your talk. What was the motivator for them taking part? What was the thing that was kind of driving them to be part of this?
That's a good question. Well, I think there's a lot of there were some people were just freelancing, or just I think most people just really want to try something new. There were also some like a few. There was one company, for instance, that had 5 people just put there. Basically the whole Elixir team of that company was there as a schooling. So I think it can be partly like motivated by their employer, but I think also in a lot of cases it's just people discovering it on themselves and reading about it. But then, I think that people learn it better when somebody explains it to them instead of them figuring it out by themselves. I think that's a lot true for a lot of people.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so again, thank you again.
Thank you.